Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, there have been some developments in Ukraine with Russia saying that they might want to do some peace talks and they might be repositioning troops, but what's the truth of all that?
So it's important to note that no matter what Russia says, it's important to watch what Russia does.
Right.
And so what we've seen over the course of the past week is that Russian government leaders have said that they would reduce their attacks towards the capital, Kyiv, in exchange for a sign of good faith as they went into another round of peace talks.
Right.
Now, truth be told, the Pentagon said that while they were saying this, it wasn't actually coming to fruition. The Pentagon said that there had been continued attacks, whether that was artillery or bombs being detonated in and around Kyiv. But at the same time, another interesting aspect of this is the Pentagon has seen Russian forces leave or retreat from where they were sort of, holed up a couple miles away from the center city. And so the Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby has said this week that they've seen roughly about 20% of the forces surrounding the city leave. Now, some of them have gone back north in the direction that they came from. But another aspect of this that's sort of to be determined at this point is where these troops are going to end up.
Sure.
And so we've heard over the last couple of days that there has been a renewed emphasis on the Donbas region, which is in the southeast part of Ukraine. And so they've sort of diverted their attention from the capital to the Donbas region. Now, it's important to note why Russia would do this. And so the big belief is that they annexed Crimea in 2014, and there are these separatist regions in the eastern part of the country, and by targeting this region, they would conceivably be able to create a land corridor that would allow them to transport, whether it's supplies, food, anything, from these two regions that they currently can't do that with. So that is really the impetus behind the belief of their efforts to get this area. And the other aspect is that we've heard different experts say that they believe this could be a talking point into the negotiations as a possible concession that the Russians would look to get. They would look to get this area in any sort of deal. Now, we haven't seen the Ukrainians show any willingness to do any sort of land swap in an agreement for a truce or a peace deal. But there are people who believe that this is sort of a sign of what's to come.
So now our government has characterized this as not really a withdrawal so much as a repositioning of troops or a redeployment. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a good point. They've very strongly refused to call this sort of a withdrawal. And the reason they say is they don't believe that they're actually withdrawing their troops. And they say if it was a real withdrawal, they would take the troops that are there and bring them back to Russia. And to this point, we haven't seen that happen.
Right.
And so to them, it's not a withdrawal, it's a redeployment. It's to figure out where these troops should go next. And the other part of this that's important to note is that none of this would happen had they been able to do what they wanted, which was topple Kyiv in a matter of days.
Right.
And so there really was a belief both in the U.S. As well as from Russia that would happen. And it would only take a couple days. But we've seen now 5.5, almost 6 weeks into the war, that the Ukrainian resistance was much stronger than either party expected, and it's why that this is these dynamics are changing now.
Now, the U.S. assessment is that Russian President Vladimir Putin may not really understand all of these dynamics. He may not be getting fully accurate information about what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, both the Pentagon and UK defense officials have said that there's intelligence to indicate that Russian President Vladimir Putin is not being told exactly what's going on the ground. And
the generals are afraid to tell him how badly it's going.
Yeah, it's a little interesting to hear these Pentagon and UK officials talk about it because it shows a lack of clarity between the man who ordered this invasion to happen and his willingness to see his ability to see what's actually going on and how it's being portrayed. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in this next step because now that the U.S. is publicizing this intelligence, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in Vladimir Putin's actions.
So there's been a lot of concern previously about escalating, but we've heard the White House and we've heard the Biden administration really sharpening their rhetoric against Putin and the Russians.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As this military operation has progressed, the U.S. has gotten more and more comfortable calling balls and strikes as they see fit. First, they were hesitant to describe the Russian military's actions as war crimes.
Right.
Now they've come out and said so definitively.
Right.
We saw President Biden call President Putin a war criminal. We saw him call him a butcher. And we even saw President Biden go all the way to say he thought Russian President Vladimir Putin shouldn't be in power anymore.
Right.
Now that created a lot of controversy as to whether or not he was actually calling for a regime change, which would have been a major step. But both he as well as administration officials were quick to sort of walk the claim back, or the significance of the claim back, saying he was merely expressing his opinion that millions of people agree with, in that he shouldn't be in power. Obviously, the president's words carry more weight than an average citizen,
Sure.
But it really was a very strong sentiment, especially coming from an administration that had been very hesitant to do so.
So President Biden also unveiled his budget for the next fiscal year, the federal budget, and this includes his request for Pentagon spending. We'll talk a little bit about what some of the top line numbers are there.
So the top line numbers, it's about $800 billion. It's slightly more for the entire defense budget, and slightly less than $800 million for specifically what goes to the Department of Defense. This is an increase from last year. It's not as much as the Republicans would have liked. A handful of Republicans on Capitol Hill were calling for a 5% increase in the budget on top of the accounting for the inflation that has changed from year to year. Now, when accounting for inflation, it was much less than a 5% bump.
Right.
So they've come out and been pretty critical in the days since the budget was released. Now, to balance that, there are a lot of progressive members of the Democratic Party on the Hill that have called for a reduction in Pentagon spending, and they were not particularly happy with the budget proposal, not because it wasn't enough like the Republicans, but because it was too much. And it is the largest budget proposal that we've seen to date, but at the same time, there's currently a war ongoing in Ukraine, and the Pentagon referred to Russia as what they called an acute threat, and they also are fighting and having to deal with preparation for potential conflict with China, whom they call their pacing challenge.
So Republicans think the budget is too small, the left says it's too big, and the White House says it's just right.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at WashingtonExaminer.com.